you eaten sadza yet?
Welcome to Sadza Space News on Sadza Space Station. My name is Nhamo. I'm your host this evening, and with me today I have the pleasure of introducing Nandi Comer, Michigan's first poet laureate in 60 years. She's also a collaborator of Sadza Space. We are honored to have you here as one of our first guests on Sadza Space News. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting. Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't know, let's get right into it.
All right.
How did you find your way into poetry?
I have a lot of different ways that I kept coming kind of back to poetry, but I think like my origin story, if you will, is that I had a high school teacher who started to teach creative writing in her English classes. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed what she was doing, and she later invited me to her creative writing class, and I've been kind of hooked on trying to articulate myself through poetry ever since. I've had other mentors in the past after that, but that's really like where it really all got started.
That's great. That's great. That's exciting. So, I can't get over this fact, so I'm gonna, hit that next. Michigan's first poet laureate in 60 years.
That's right.
Tell us what that means to you. What is that like?
It means so much. So like it was traditionally like this position that you would get after you wrote like 5, 6, 7 books and you were well on into retirement, and it was kind of like an honorific, like a life achievement acknowledgement. But I think that that's starting to change in different municipalities all over the country. They really started to notice that like the position became just that, an honor. And then the person may not be able to actually do much because of age or energy or what. And they would do like a couple of programs. And so now municipalities are asking for their poet laureates to be like much more energized. I'm traveling all over the state, and I'm doing readings and doing workshops. And that has been, and when they first asked me, I thought, I haven't done enough in my career for you all to be asking me to do this. But once they told me what they wanted, I said, oh, I know how to do this. These are things that I've been doing for over 20 years. But also, in Michigan, I think that Michigan has incredible writers. So to be like selected as the person to represent Michigan poetry, it means a lot because we've got heavy hitters coming out of the state. We have National Book Award winners, Pulitzer Prize winners, and to be named that really felt like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And I get to tell that story. But the last thing that really never goes away is this idea that like I'm the first Black woman, the first Black person to represent Michigan in this way. And I can't let that go lightly. That really is something that has a lot of gravity for me. So when I'm in the UP and people are asking about what does it mean for me to be a Michigan poet, I want them to know like it's also that I'm a Black poet and I write about Black history. And so it's really important that I get to share Detroit history and Black history with the whole state.
That's amazing. I wasn't aware of those firsts. That's really awesome.
Yeah,
that's really something. So my next question is not loaded, but it's a lot, right?
I'm ready. I think I'm ready.
Okay, so with ZCCD, our organization, you have participated twice with LitFest Harare. The second time you actually got to visit Zimbabwe. And then you assisted with Ethel when she visited here in her residency that she did with us here in Detroit. What have these exchanges felt like for you, and what did Zimbabwe mean to you?
Oh man, it was it's been an unexpected relationship, and it starts with Cheeto asking if we would host some Detroit writers here in Detroit prior to even my relationship with LitFest Harare. Like he almost always is very much trying to find out when there are artists from Zimbabwe coming into the United States and figuring out ways for them to come and have an experience, an exchange in Detroit. So we hosted 2 poets prior to being invited to the LitFest. And that was like very intriguing and amazing because I was unfamiliar with Zimbabwean poetry before that invitation. And then to be invited to LitFest Harare, I was able to be in conversation with people, even though they were afar. It was closing a gap for me, especially during COVID when we all were very isolated.
Sure.
This gap that also would have been there without COVID, like a gap that's literally on the other side of the world, right? And being able to speak with writers and participate in a conference with writers on the other side of the world, in the continent no less, is really something that I really valued. But then to go and visit, it's just, we don't have enough time to talk about all the experiences that felt so meaningful to me, to learn about the ways in which Zimbabwean writers think about language, for example, was just really eye-opening, especially as someone who has another language, but not 3, 4, 5 languages that some folks have, but just listening to the idea of a mother tongue and listening to the elders, and also listening to some of the obstacles that writers are experiencing all over the world built this kind of kinship for me when I was there. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I think you were starting to touch on some of this in your previous answer there, but what else gets you excited to write? Where do you find that motivation? I know, as an artist myself, it's hard sometimes to pick up my instrument and practice my craft, create something new. Where do you get that from?
I think I'm always responding to what's happening. Oftentimes, I might be responding to what's happening in the news or what's happening in the community, things that I witness. Is usually a focal point of response for me. And there's always something going on where I am. No matter where I am, I feel like I'm always observing things that I want to respond to. But then the other thing that I'm also just in conversation with writers. So oftentimes when I say in conversation, I'm always reading. And so oftentimes I'll see the way that a writer has attempted to master a certain subject, and I go, oh, that reminds me of another subject that I'm thinking of in my own life. And it just happened last night where someone was writing about, it was something not even connected to what I ended up writing about, but it's a way in which it inspires me to think of new ways of thinking about experiences by looking at how writers in the past and even recently have tried to think about things, and it helps me to kind of attempt new things. I also oftentimes force myself to write a poem a day.
Wow.
Yeah, they're not always good poems. Sometimes they're just 3 lines of really bad. But I'm glad that I did that, because then it'll get me to another poem. Maybe 3 days later, I'll get to a poem that I really want to keep. Whereas if I wait for the poem to come, I'd be waiting for months for that poem to come instead of making myself sit down and just, think through everything can be a poem, right?
Sure.
So every day I find something, when I'm doing poem a day, I find something that can be a poem.
Great answer. And great segue. I think I understood we're honored to have you read something of yours. Okay.
I would love to read a poem.
Great.
So I don't memorize my poem, so I brought it here. I typed it. It's and it actually is again a poem of response, but it was from a research project that I did. I decided I wanted to research how Detroiters felt about techno and how they felt about their own music. So I interviewed people all over the city. And the language that Detroiters use is so poetic that I actually just pulled lines directly from the interviews to help compose this poem. So I'm going to read it to you.
All right.
It's a persona poem, so it's somebody else's voice. I think of it as a collective Detroit voice. Detroit tells its techno story. Let me be honest. Back in the day, I had to go to Chicago to see my music. We had to go to Europe to be validated. We were preps, holding up our high school clubs. Back then, rec centers turned into after-hour gay bars. Dudes would roll their coffins anywhere they let them play. Social clubs, supermarkets. As long as we could drop tracks, we dropped them big black boxes and showed the world our turntables and speakers. And the people would break dance. That was before NWA. Techno was Detroit's response to Germany. We turned Tour de France into a breakbeat. We took Kraftwerk and mixed it with the breath of the machine. Canadians tried to come over here and take our style, but whatever sound they pushed out their studios just wasn't right. It had no funk. Detroit found a way to add a break in the breath. Then computers had all kind of regular kids getting creative, and now we got all kind of DJ Noodlefinger wannabes dropping that booty like it's hot, with no liner notes, no album art, no live venues, no radio personality pledging by your new hook, no way to know where you stole it from. You can hear us in French techno, dubstep, and Nicki Minaj, K-pop, and Afrobeat. Kanye say he even got his sound from us, and still folks stumbling around the hood talking about we got no legacy. I couldn't see myself until someone from outside showed me how I looked. Until they put my picture in the paper, my mother thought I was selling drugs. I was always gone, always came home with new clothes. My friends thought I was a nobody, but they heard my shit on the radio. They just didn't know who it was. I ain't got no computer class. I worked 3 jobs and still stole clothes from Eastland Mall, so I flew. Got on a plane and nobody and off in Japan, and I'm a somebody, a superstar. Came home and my boy still said, forget that fool. I had a gold record and a beat up Toyota that damn near wouldn't start. It's hard to be people in Detroit thinking on another level. No matter how much foreign dirt I kick, I still got home running through me. This music passion is one of the few things that make me. Nothing else work. Nothing else put me on the other side of the planet. Not the army. Not some woman. Not some rich man. Me. My music. My machines.
That was amazing. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Timely, like the Electronic Music Festival movement is going to be happening soon, so it feels very timely.
Yeah. I think I've been to that a couple of times. It is something to see here in Detroit, for sure. Yeah.
You know, Detroit is such a musical city, but I started to write about techno because everyone sometimes only wants to talk about Motown as its international kind of contribution to culture. And I think oftentimes people, especially from outside, don't know that like Detroit impacted so much of our global music that we listen to now, you know. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Great observation. Great point. Yeah. I think I'm guilty of that. It's interesting to think of it in this light as well. So. So I think I was going to ask if you have any projects or anything exciting you're working on that you might want to talk about and share with us.
So sort of in connection with the poem that I just read, I've been very nostalgic. Okay. I've been thinking a lot about what it meant to be a girl growing up in the 90s. And so I've been working on a series of poems that are specific to just being like a teenager. And I was 10 in 1990 and I was 20 in Y2K. Mm-hmm. And so it feels like a good, like perfect little sandwich of when I can talk about things that were happening in our like local and global history, but also my own like kind of nostalgia perspective. So there's some poems about Detroit history. There's some poems about trying to welcome in Y2K. And then there's also just things about me growing up as a adolescent.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great chunk of time. I mean, so much was packed in there, right? Mm-hmm. Just from all aspects of our culture. Yeah,
like internet and email started in that decade. So many things happened.
Yeah. And we take it for granted. It feels like we've had it forever, but it's not that it's not that old. So you have a lot of experience with youth development and working with people and children in the Detroit public schools. How has this impacted you and your work? I know usually when I work with kids, it's a give and take, right? You give them something and they give you something back. Mm-hmm. How's this impacted you?
Well, teaching in general, I just say teaching in general is also one of the lifelines. So reading and teaching have also been very helpful to help me work through poems. I oftentimes understand poetry better once I'm asked to bring it to someone and say, let's talk about it. How does it work? What do you see? Oftentimes they show me things that I haven't seen in the poems, and I come to a better understanding, and I come to sharpen my own practice just from the practice of teaching. So I really like being in the classroom, but being in Detroit schools is really important to me because I think that I definitely feel like I'm a part of the weirdo tribe. I feel like I'm an artist, and I feel like there are a lot of students who oftentimes are being pushed to engage in things that don't necessarily fulfill them in their soul and their heart. And I feel like I'm a part of countering that dominant narrative of what they need to do in order to feel whole, which is like you just make a bunch of money and then you'll feel whole. I think that yes, find employment that will definitely advance your life and create a better quality of life. But quality of life is not only financial. I think that it's in the arts where people find their human selves, right? And I want to be a participant. I want to contribute to youth learning how to express themselves and knowing that there's a space in their humanity that they can figure out through either poetry, music, dance, whatever that is. My best way to do it is through poetry, but I just want students to know that it's okay for them to engage in the arts.
Okay. So we're going to start wrapping up here. And I guess I really wanted to take this time to ask you if there's anything else you'd like to share with us in terms of anything that's on top of your mind that you want to get out there. And I know you have a very busy schedule as Poet Laureate, right?
Yes.
Talk about that or anything you want to...
Yeah, so it's exciting but sad that this is my last year as Poet Laureate. So my term will end in December, and I am packing in a lot between now and December. I'll have my capstone project where I'm showcasing poets on billboards around the state. But I'm also, through my own personal work, through a program that I helped co-lead, Detroit Lit, which was the organization that hosted the Zimbabwean writers.
Okay.
Through that, we are gearing up for a professional development conference for writers so that writers can learn what to do with their writing once they're done with it.
Wow.
So oftentimes people, they write these incredible poems, they come up with these incredible novels, but have no idea how to pitch it to a publisher, or they don't know how to get an agent. And so we're going to have some panels and some workshops for writers around the metro area, specifically focused on writers of color. So, yeah.
That is a lot. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been so enjoyable.
I really enjoyed myself,
yeah,
too.
I want to thank you for joining us here at Sadza Space News.
Yeah.
On Sadza Space Station. And thanks again. Be well.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is fun.
Awesome.
All right.
Have you eaten sadza yet?